Hello and welcome. In this video, we are going to learn two ways to deal with exceptions, one by ignoring them and the other by catching and handling them. We are going to develop a simple flow that reads a Google Sheets document and visits each of the URLs listed in it. We will then generate a fake exception by deleting a URL to create a scenario where we can use the catch node to handle an exception in our flow. Let's start by adding an inject node to our flow and renaming it Start. We will read the entire spreadsheet and visit each URL one by one. Since we need to visit URLs, we must use the Open Browser node to launch Chrome. After that, to read the Google Sheets document, we should use the Open Spreadsheet node from the Google Sheets package, as we learned in previous videos. Next, we will add the getRange node. Be careful not to mix different packages just because they have the same node names. Make sure you're adding the correct getRange node to avoid errors. We need to set the URL field of the Open Spreadsheets node. For selecting credentials, you should first create a service account, generate a JSON key, and add it to your vault as demonstrated in the previous videos. Also, do not forget to share this document with the service account email. You can find the link describing these steps in the YouTube description. Now let's add a debug node to our flow and run. The getRange node retrieved the data from the spreadsheet. As you can see, the column names are A and B. Let's now check the rows. Here there seems to be 4 rows, but actually the first row is the header. Instead of A and B and use the actual column names, we need to select the headers option here. We will also check the JSONify option to convert the header names to lowercase and replace any spaces with underscores. After updating the flow, let's run it. Now, when we check the rows, we see only 3 with the correct column names. We now need to iterate through these rows using the for each node, which requires an array. Here, the rows returned is an array of JSON objects. We will end the flow after our for each node is complete, so we can use a stop node here. And we can connect this port to the open link node. For each iteration, we will go through the table.rows array. Here, the table is located within the message object, and rows is the array within the table object that we want to iterate over. It contains all the rows from the spreadsheet. Let's name the current item value as row. This is the current iterated JSON row object from the array. We will get the URL value from the row under the message object with a JSONified column name as row.url. The URL comes from this JSON object. Here you can see this row object in the rows array. Now I need to check the Open in Same tab option, because if you don't check this, for each iteration it will open a new Chrome window for each URL. And we want the links to be opened in the same tab. And also, I want to wait 1 second before opening the next link. Let's run this now to see if it works. We have successfully opened the first URL. Now we can continue with our iterations to open the next URLs. Let's add a goto node here and a label here. We need to return to the beginning of the for each node for the next iteration, and the goto node is perfect for this case. Select the label you want your flow to continue from. You can also rename this as the next URL, and you can rename the for each as for each URL. Now let's run this again. The first link is open, After 1 second, the second link is opened. And after 1 second, we open our final link. We can add a 2-second delay to the stop node. Now our flow works. The flow is straightforward and illustrates what we refer to as the ideal scenario, or the happy path, where everything works as expected. But in real-world flows, this is not the case. Let's now create a scenario that disrupts the flow and causes an exception. Let's see what happens when we delete this second URL and then try running the flow. The first link is opened. For the second link, the designer displayed an error and is waiting for the developer to check it. In production, this will not be the case. If an unhandled exception occurs, the flow stops immediately. But in the designer, it waits for the developer to check the error. URL cannot be empty exception occurred, leading the open link node to fail. Now there are 2 ways to handle this. The first way is simply by ignoring exceptions. To do this, click the Continue on Error checkbox, then rerun the flow. As the second URL was empty, the flow now skipped to the third URL and continued without any exceptions. But what if you don't want to ignore and handle the exception? Then in this case, we need to use a catch node. Add a catch node to the flow. Then, in the catch node properties, select the node for which you want to catch exceptions. In our case, we want to catch the exceptions from the open link node and then skip to the next URL by returning to the beginning of the for each node. We can connect the catch node here, or better, connect it to the go-to node so that the catch node will be closer to the open link node, enhancing maintainability. And let's run this again. In the Continue on Error scenario, the flow skips the error, and similarly, in this case with the catch node, we have done the same thing. However, this is not the correct way to use a catch node, as it is no different from the Continue on Error scenario. The distinction here is that when you catch an error, the flow continues from the catch node, allowing us to process the error and handle the error case in our flow logic. We can use a function or a switch node to make decisions, or send notifications via email, Slack, or Discord. These are typical scenarios for handling exceptions. Afterwards, you can continue the flow wherever you want, choosing either to stop or to proceed. So, we can use the catch nodes to handle exceptions and decide whether to continue based on the problem. Let's add a debug node here to observe and understand the error added to the message object by the catch node. Here in the debug node output, we can see a field named error. Here we can see the error object. We can use the function node to process it, use it in an email subject line, or perform other actions. Selecting each node in the catch properties is cumbersome, and what if another node fails? We have to create a catch-all node and then uncheck the already caught nodes. There's a better way to accomplish this by utilizing subflows in your flow. In this case, we only need to catch the open link node errors with a catch node inside the subflow, and we can catch any other node exceptions from the main flow scope. If the inner catch node catches an error, it is not caught by the main scope catch, just like the try-catch pairs in programming languages. Without a subflow, filtering what we want to capture and exclude using the catch node properties across tens or hundreds of nodes would be difficult. Let's shift these nodes closer to each other so that we can cut and paste them into a subflow. After doing this, we can add a new subflow node into our flow. Let's rename this subflow to Visit URLs. Subflows help separate the logic of the flow more effectively. Double-click to enter the subflow and then paste the nodes here. Subflows start with the begin node and end with the end node. Here, we need to replace the stop node with the end node. We can move the stop node to the main flow scope here. We now have a subflow. We can gracefully handle the inner subflow exceptions with a catch node inside the subflow and leave the unhandled and unexpected ones to the main scope. We can catch errors from the open link node or other nodes here and handle them quietly. We may skip and continue, or we might process them and send notifications. But if something unexpected occurs, we can catch it in the main scope. If we do not, the flow will stop regardless. But by catching the subflow exception, we can then decide how to proceed. We can process this error, send notifications or emails to the relevant parties, and then stop gracefully. But in this example, to keep the flow simple, we will just catch the error and then stop the flow. In the main scope, we are going to catch exceptions from the Visit URL subflow that are not caught by the inner catch node. The exceptions from the Open Link node are caught internally, so we will try catching exceptions from the Open Spreadsheet node by breaking the URL link and see what happens. Let's also put a debug node here. And now, as you can see, the subflow exception is caught by the main scope's catch node, and the error is an invalid Google Spreadsheet URL. In this video, we have learned two ways to handle exceptions: by selecting the Continue on Error option to ignore them, and by using catch nodes, either in a fine-tuned manner or in a broader way to catch all exceptions. Thank you for watching.